Heather again from World Class Tutoring, and let's talk about semicolons. So the SAT absolutely loves semicolons. And if you've been following this class from the beginning, you already know that. You've already seen the rules for semicolons, but I do want to review them here and put the two of them together so you see exactly how they work. And basically, semicolons almost always work exactly like periods. For instance, I have a lot of work to do. I'll get started right after my nap. Those are two independent clauses. Each of those could be a sentence by itself, and I could put a period right where that semicolon is. Um, and I would usually test this. If this is one of the options, I'm going to test it by doing what I call the semicolon test. All right, independent, independent, and I'll show I have a lot of work to do. Yes, that's an independent clause. I'll get started right after my nap. Yes, that's an independent clause. So this is a well-used semicolon, exactly in the right place. I was so engrossed in the movie that I forgot all about my popcorn. And then we have a semicolon, so I'm going to use that test. And yes, forgetting all about my popcorn, that I could put a period after popcorn, so that's an independent clause. However, my friend was totally bored. Yeah, that could be an independent clause. Hey, however starts the sentence all the time, and it has a comma afterwards. So it's not unusual to have a semicolon and then the word however and then a comma. And we even saw an example in the previous unit, right, where there was a however and a comma and then however and the semicolon came afterwards. Both are possible. You have to read carefully to find out where logically where that however has to go. In this case, however, is perfectly placed, and this is a well-used semicolon. All right. There is a rule number two, a second way that you can use a semicolon, and you will not be surprised because we've talked about this already. It is called a super list, right? A super list is when you take a list. Well, this is going to look like this, where you have an item 1, 2, and 3. And then a super list is where those commas between the items get upgraded to semicolons, right? 1, 2, and 3. And what you'll notice is that Oxford comma, right? We talked about that when we talked about what standard English conventions were. That's called the Oxford comma. So we actually kind of get an Oxford semicolon when you do a super list. So right here, this combination, big clue, if you see that in a sentence, it's definitely a super list because you will never have an and after a semicolon when you're using it to separate independent clauses, right? So only in super list can you do that. And there's your clue. If you ever see that in a sentence on the SAT, it should jump out at you and you can say, oh, I know what I'm looking at. This is a super list. So let's talk about what super lists are. My favorite fruits include, this would be like the stem. And that stem has several leaves growing off of it or items, right? Citrus fruits, such as orange, lemon, and lime. Berries, like raspberry, like strawberry, raspberry, and blueberry. And stone fruits such as peach, apricot, and plum. And then we can tell within these items, it is a super list because there's already commas within those items. So we're going to upgrade the commas between the items into semicolons so that they don't just get like joined together and we have commas everywhere. And then it's very hard to see where one item ends and the next one starts. Okay. The whole point of these super lists is to find a pattern and follow it. And you can see that within item 1, 2, and 3, we do have a very recognizable pattern. We have a type of fruit, either citrus, right, berries, or stone fruits. And then you have the words such as. We're seeing those. Let me get a new color. We're seeing those words every single time, such as. Oh, we have like, right? And then we have a such as. In fact, this would be a better super list if I use such as again. And then I have such as here. That's what you're looking for. When you have a super list, you're looking for all 3 items to follow a pattern over and over again. And you're going to pick the answer that keeps that pattern going. Okay, so and if you have the semicolon and together, you know, that's how you know you're looking at a super list. All right, let's do some examples. I've got 2 for you. I'll be quiet for a moment so you can choose your own answer. Please pause the video. All right, hopefully you have your answer now. Let's take a look at it together. When I look at these answers, one thing I'm going to do, I always look at the answers first. I see a semicolon and I cross that off right away, right? Because unless this is a super list, this is a wrong answer. And then later when I read it, if I change my mind, I think it is a super list, I'll reconsider and I'll pick C. When I look at the other options, I see a comma, a semicolon, and nothing. There are so many ways to use commas. They're very hard to test. And nothing, well, you put there everywhere. You don't put the other punctuation points. So a semicolon is the easiest one to test. I am going to test this first. And the way I'm going to test it is by doing that semicolon test. I know you can't write on the test when you're taking it on the app, so you kind of have to think this instead of write it. But I like to show you what I'm thinking. I'm asking myself, do I have two independent clauses, one on each side of that semicolon? Despite her proclivity for using abstruse language, the professor was nonetheless an adept communicator. Yeah, I could put a period after that. That is an independent clause. Her facility for articulating complex ideas with nuance and panache was a testament to her intellectual acumen. Oh, that's hard to say, but it is indeed an independent clause. The answer is B. And what's nice about this semicolon test that I just did, if it passes the test, and it just did pass the test, I don't have to worry about A and D. I can only have one right answer, and that right answer is definitely B here. Okay. Let's take a look at my other example. I'll be quiet. Please read it yourself and come up with your own answer. All right, hopefully you pause the video. You've got an answer now. Let's look at it together. I'm going to look at the answers. I see nothing, dash, comma, and semicolon. I'm not really seeing, I know this is a punctuation question. I'm not really seeing a pattern, though. I can't automatically cancel anything. But when I read, I'm going to be looking for sentence structure, right? And I do like to make that semicolon the first thing I test. So I'm looking if there's independent clauses here. Right, the lawyer's argument was well reasoned and persuasive. Ooh, I already have a semicolon. That's interesting because you don't usually have multiple semicolons in a sentence. But look here, I do have multiple semicolons. And not only that, I have a semicolon next to the word and. Ooh, there's my big clue. This is definitely a super list. So what I really want to do is find the pattern and stick with it. So let's see. The lawyer's argument was well reasoned and persuasive. I guess I should say argument was. Now, I guess this is a list of independent clauses because he's cited, um, he was, his mastery of the subject, one, mastery one. Yeah, I think I've got one. And then it looks like two. No, two is here. This is three. And we have four. Four independent clauses, I feel like the count. And in between those independent clauses, I must have semicolons. Hey, the word case is the end of two and the beginning of three. And in that spot, that is the spot in between items, is where I've got to put the semicolon. So because this is a super list, D is going to be the correct answer.